It's GameCube Index, and this week we meet a character named Gerd. Most people these days probably first heard of From Software with their huge hit Souls series. Before that, they were known for Armored Core and that one game called Eternal Ring, which you should totally talk to me about on Twitter. In 2002, From Software dipped its toes into the GameCube pool with Lost Kingdoms. First shown at Space World 2001, the original and Japanese title of the game was Rune, and it was a bit of a mystery. Nintendo included the title in their Space World schedule, but didn't immediately include the developer's name, leading to rumors and speculation that it was coming from Square or Enix. The reveal of From Software came as a surprise, as they had never before released a game on a Nintendo console. Lost Kingdoms is a card-based fantasy RPG that follows the journey of Princess Katia, the heir to the crown of Alanya, as she travels to find her father, the king, after the kingdom has been enveloped in a black fog. Along the way, she realizes that she is in possession of the mysterious runestones, and she comes in contact with a mysterious merchant woman named Gerd, who buys and sells cards that Katia uses for combat. The game is set up like a third-person isometric RPG, and things get crazy upon entering into a random encounter. As mentioned, combat is handled via real-time card summons. When played, cards summon different monsters to execute attacks or restore Katia's health. Nothing's turn-based, and you are dealt 4 cards at a time. Once all the uses are up for a card, it burns away, and if you completely run out of cards, you need to restart from the beginning of the level. It requires a certain amount of strategy to make sure that you have the maximum amount of cards going into things, but also that you have effective cards for the enemies that you'll encounter. It takes a bit of time to get used to this funky combat system. It's definitely not a traditional RPG, and none of it is explained very well either. But if you keep your eyes open and speak to everyone that you can, you'll get a hang of things before you know it. From a visual standpoint, Lost Kingdoms looks pretty good, especially considering it's the first release from Software on the GameCube. However, the levels are fairly empty, so while the 3D models look decent enough, there's not much to look at. Most of the visuals fall on the drab side, as there isn't a whole ton of color either, which seems like a weird thing to nitpick, but it can get pretty old pretty fast. Another thing that gets old pretty fast is throwing cards around an arena, especially with how slow the execution is. It takes a few seconds to draw a card, and then for the monster to spawn, and in that time, the enemies just keep coming at you. So unless you're hyper aware and you dodge really quickly, you'll take more than a few hits while trying your best. The toughest thing is keeping cards in your deck, and it's really frustrating to make it all the way to the level boss just to run out of cards and have to restart the whole thing. Lost Kingdoms was released to very mixed reviews, with most reviewers skewing towards the negative side of the coin. The biggest gripe was definitely the execution of the card combat, and there's no doubt that the game would have been greatly improved had there been a more traditional combat system in place instead of an unpolished deck of cards. There was one sequel, Lost Kingdoms 2, which we'll check out in episode 246. After that, From Software would never release another game on a Nintendo home console, with the exception of a couple of Japan-only DS titles. They would then go on to take the world by storm through a cleansing fire of pain with Demon Souls and Dark Souls. Looking back, Lost Kingdoms is one of those games that's worth checking out because of the development studio, to see what sort of games they made back then, and because it was one of the first RPG titles in the GameCube. But just because it's worth checking out, doesn't mean that you'll enjoy it. That is it for this week's episode of GameCube Index. If you enjoy the videos every week, consider backing us on Patreon. Even $1 a month will do a lot to support the project and help improve the experience. It's entirely up to you. Either way, please continue to show your support by subscribing, sharing, following along on Twitter at GCNdex and at GCNdex.com. Thank you so much for watching. Tune in next time when we drive dangerously in Burnout.